diabetes, heart disease, cancer, things like Alzheimer's.
We've got to ask ourselves what we need to do to make that happen. And that's what this entire program was designed to do, to become the most healthy and most exuberant, most vibrant that you can possibly be.
And that's a good segue into our last and final part of the podcast series, which was covering circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm being the quote unquote clock that our body is on, and the functions that it does on a daily, monthly, yearly, whatever, just different cycles that our body goes into. Now we did talk about circadian rhythm quite a bit, actually, in the intestinal health podcast, because everything is this, as you can see, this is all interrelated. It's all down to the cellular level, and all our cells interact with each other. So touching what we discussed in the intestinal health podcast regarding circadian rhythm, there's a few things that you talked about that I want to kind of break down a little bit. You mentioned things like BMAL 1 and clock, period 2, and cryptochrome 1. What is all that?
When you look at circadian rhythm, you've got to look at what controls our clock structures. In other words, our clocks control how things happen within our bodies. And that clock, we go to bed and we get back up and we go about our day, and then we go to bed and we get back up and we go about our day. And this is our life. This is what we do every day of our life for as long as we're here on this planet. And we know that there are certain real aspects to our ability to do things in an orderly fashion on a 24-hour basis. Jet lag, for example, is a real syndrome. When people get in an airplane and go halfway across the earth, they end up sick. They end up having difficulty sleeping. They end up having ability to get ill really quickly. And it takes as long as 1 to 2 weeks for their metabolisms to straighten out to where they're back to sleeping normally and getting up normally, and not feeling torn up, completely tired out. So there is a function to getting up and going to bed every day at the same times, and that function is pretty well controlled by day and night, light and dark. When we see the sun go down, we begin to get tired. It's a function of our biochemistry. The hypothalamus is where a section of neurons is located called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that SCN bundle of nerves is what senses light and dark. From there, it tells the body, if it's dark, to start producing a chemical called melatonin. And melatonin then soaks your brain and puts you to sleep. It lowers brain waves down into the theta and delta areas and gets you so that you start to drift off and can go to bed and go to sleep. And then after you go to sleep, within 45 minutes, growth hormone gets released throughout your body at a 300 times its normal level, so that you can begin the process of repair and recovery while you go to sleep for the next 8 hours. And various things begin happening. Various hormones begin released. Various cycles begin repair. Various things begin taking place at various times and structures. From midnight until 4 a.m. in the morning, your vascular system from your waist down kind of hypofunctions. It just narrows down, and the blood seems to leave that lower part of your body for that 4-hour period of time. Every morning at 8:30, it's typical for a person to want to go to the bathroom because the bowels begin peristaltic action at about that time. There's all kinds of facets to circadian rhythm that are governed in total by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, getting that signal of light and dark, and that's the master clock. Now, from there, all the other clocks take place. And it doesn't mean that they all happen, shut off, or turn on depending on that light or dark, but depending on what that suprachiasmatic nucleus bundle of nerves sees as light or dark, day or night, and the melatonin starts the process. Depending on that, clocks of all natures begin and end their cycles underneath that master signal. And those clocks begin happening and having other functions take place throughout your entire biochemistry, so that these things begin taking place at various times of night and day. So that's the circadian rhythm, the suprachiasmatic nucleus being the master clock, governing all the other clocks that take place downstream from it. And that suprachiasmatic nucleus controls things like sleep and wake, when you go to bed and when you wake up, what your brainwave activity is, what your core body temperature is, whether you got thirst or appetite. It's controlled by that bundle of nerves. What your hormone production is during the day, when the cells are regenerating throughout the day, month, and year. All of these things are being controlled by that master clock, having control over downstream clocks throughout your entire biochemistry.
And that's important to talk about, because in this podcast, we did talk about the fact that it's very easy to make our circadian rhythm dysfunctional.
Absolutely.
It's too easy. And with that and the, the list you just gave of what those affect, we talked about the fact that having elongated or circadian rhythms that were off, you talked about melatonin and the sleep-wake cycle. Yeah. So having an off circadian rhythm causes insomnia, which is fairly obvious from that standpoint. But there's other things that circadian rhythm not being in the proper balance affects, such as obesity, diabetes, depression, bipolar disorder,
absolutely,
seasonal affective disorder, and it just goes to that. There's a lot of things that are controlled and depend on this proper circadian rhythm, and when it's just a little askew, it can cause some major problems.
Absolutely.
Getting down to the cellular level, this is what our cells expect of us. This is what we need to give them. It's completely within our control to give our cells what they need. And in doing so, we're talking about completely eliminating diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and a myriad of other diseases.
But indeed, it truly is there. I mean, the DNA is the code. If anybody asks me what I consider health to be, can I define the quality of good health? Good health is the application of the DNA program. If we would obey the code written in our DNA, then our cells would perform according to that code. It's us that absconds with that code. We're the ones that mess it up. We're the ones that refuse to apply ourselves to what the cells ask of us. We get a sense then of ourselves as a whole human being, but then we also get the sense that we are no longer able to, with disregard, do anything that we care to do to ourselves. We now must take a look at what we require to generate that quality of health, that application of the proper DNA code.